Welcome to the Happy Mama Movement podcast. I'm Amy Taylor-Kabbaz, mama, journalist, coach, and founder of Mama Rising. This podcast is a space of community and collaboration. We gather stories of matrescence, motherhood, womanhood, and change told by our Mama Rising coaches and mothers around the globe, in the knowing that through our stories, we can begin to heal and change the way the world sees, values, and supports mothers everywhere. So, welcome to the Happy Mama Movement. Welcome back, mamas. Today, you're going to meet a beautiful mama who came into my world about 6-7 years ago. And you'll hear in this interview that we remembered that the reason why she first came into my world was she signed up for my free 5-day program called 5 Days to Calm. I think this was released about 8 years ago. And when I finally closed it, I think there were 3,500 mums that had done it. This program was the beginning of everything in this work for me, because I realised that the number one thing that most of the mamas around me and myself included were struggling with was this feeling of not being able to stay calm in the chaos. So in those 5 days, we started to really understand our anger and just bring in simple tools to deal with the overwhelm every day. The amazing thing about Nicole's story that you're about to hear is that 5-day program also led eventually to her understanding herself as an autistic mother, and how she has now, 7 years later, taken her training as an OT and also now as a Mama Rising coach and facilitator to support other mothers who are deeply overwhelmed on a daily basis because of their own neurodiversity with matrescence. Talk about a full circle moment. Gosh, this journey is amazing. I can't wait for you to hear Nicole's story, and please reach out to her and let her know what you think and what you take away from this interview. Enjoy. Beautiful Nicole, thank you for joining me on the podcast. I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
We have known each other for a long time and been through many incarnations of going through matrescence together. Should we start with your experience of becoming a mama, and then what led you to this space and your experience of matrescence?
Yeah. So I became a mama 9.5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
My eldest was born. And things, I guess, went pretty smoothly, I think, as far as, the beginnings of motherhood go, particularly with neurodivergent children. Because I felt like with one child, I kind of had everything relatively under control. We had our routines. I created it as I needed it to be. And it was not until I had my second baby exactly 2 years later that things started to unravel a little bit in my matrescence journey. Not that I knew it was called matrescence back then. So I had, I guess it started in that second pregnancy where I had a lot of physical pain. So I found that really quite challenging, parenting a toddler with a lot of physical pain. And then my second birth was actually quite beautiful and fairly healing compared to my first. So that was quite good. But then when baby came along, my then toddler really started to challenge me. And that is when I started to unravel, and things like the mum rage started to really present for me. And that's when I stumbled across your work, and I probably did like your first free 5 days to calm or whatever it was called
Yes.
back then. And I was like, yep, that's me. I'm yelling, I'm screaming, I'm like losing my mind here because this toddler is pushing me in every single way.
Mm.
I mean, what I know now is that she was trying to control everything in her little world because of her levels of anxiety. And so was I. And then you're just butting heads against each other constantly. So I remember like my defining moment right back then was when I was trying to put baby to sleep. The toddler was needing me. She just kept coming at me, at me, at me. I ended up needing to call my husband to come home because I just lost it. I
Mm.
was yelling at her, um, and ended up sort of grabbing her and like pushing her to the couch. And and I ended up screaming so much that I woke up the baby. I'm like, oh, this is not okay. Like, this is really not okay. And I had so many feelings of guilt and shame around that and other similar incidents that I'm like, oh, something needs to change here. And I think that's when you just popped into my inbox or socials and I'm like, okay, this is the beginning of something here. But, then of course it took many years to start, doing and continue doing the work and come out of what I now know was postnatal depletion, potentially autistic burnout,
Mhm.
all of the things.
I recorded an episode and released it just a few weeks ago about maternal rage and shared my experience of it as well. And actually, in that episode, gave a description of where maternal rage comes from and actually talk about many of the clients I've had over the years who were undiagnosed neurodiverse, themselves, and didn't realize that the reason why they were snapping and breaking and, as you said, unraveling was even just the sensory overload of toddler and baby, mum, 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 wah, 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 and the mess and the noise, and can I have another
Mm.
snack? And the healing that comes from understanding yourself in this way, finally. It makes me emotional even just saying that to you, from my own experience of finally understanding where my rage came from. But also, I remember meeting you all those years ago, and even hearing your stories and coaching you through those experiences of trying to forgive yourself and understand yourself and be a calmer mama. But it wasn't until years later, was it, that you finally understood this diagnosis for yourself and for your children?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Even though I'm an occupational therapist and I knew
Mm.
about neurodivergence and autism and um, all of the things, I did not put two and two together at all. Like, I knew there were differences. And, when my first daughter was 2, I went to a psychologist. I'm like, this is really hard. Like, should parenting be this hard? Like, help me out. And I just hit a brick wall. Like, it was completely invalidating, suggested reward charts and, off you
Mm.
go kind of thing, suggesting that maybe it was my connection with her or my attachment that was lacking. A lot of, which is such a common story that I hear from so many mums, that the first professional they reach out to, it's a bad experience, and then that stops them in their tracks, really, from reaching out for further support. And that was my experience, even as a health professional, reaching out to another. So yeah, it wasn't. So fast forward to I had another baby. So I had 2 little girls, and then I had my third 5 years later almost. So she's now 2.5. Um, it was still exploring, still having challenges. Like, I had done a lot of the work through your programs and other coaching and therapy, and things were definitely so much improved in how I was managing. But then it was sort of when my eldest went through her first year of schooling and into the second, she kind of she became so dysregulated, like not wanting to go to school, having like the huge volcano effect of like after school meltdowns from holding it all in all day of school and trying to be perfect and amazing and not get in trouble from the teacher and do everything right. And then after school, the huge meltdowns, which again, a common experience, especially that I hear from autistic girls, boys as well, but particularly for the girls who are trying to hold it in and do it all perfectly. So at that point, I was like, this is really hard. This is not right. She is so upset. I'm so upset, all unraveling again. And so I think it wasn't until her third year of schooling in year 2 that we finally sought a diagnosis of autism for her. And through that process, I was like, oh yeah, like all the questions that the psychologist and the speechy were asking through that. I mean, I already had an inkling sort of before that, I guess, given what I know. But that made me really think, yeah, this is a thing for me as well. Like I have lots of these similar struggles. Then I went on, and my second daughter had very similar experience. I knew more by then, so we managed to get her diagnosis in like just at the end of her. No, sorry, into her second year of schooling. But the same thing happened. She entered the school system, all of the pressures, like they're expected to sit and learn, and arguably it's just inappropriate for their age group.
Mm.
And the expectations threw her into a spin as well. So she was a lot calmer. My second child has always been my easier one to deal with, but even her, she went through the system and it didn't work for her either. So she was masking heavily all day at school, and we can talk more about that concept of masking, but leading to huge big meltdowns. She turned into a different person, from this happy, easy-go-lucky little girl to this highly anxious, like little one who was melting down constantly. This is not right either. So I'm like, oh wow, she's autistic too, I think, but completely different little people, so different in every
Mm.
way. But yet we got her diagnosis as well. And my eldest is saying to me, through this process, Mummy, are you going to get your diagnosis too? Are you going to do it as well? And I'm like, yeah, yep. And I kept putting it. So once I got those two sorted, I'm like, okay, I don't really have any more excuses now. I suppose I'll do this. So just a couple of months ago, I finally went through the formal process myself to get diagnosed autistic. And I went into that diagnosis, that diagnostic assessment, being nervous about not so much about getting the diagnosis, about potentially not getting it, which again is
Ah,
a common experience I hear, that people are like, oh, maybe it's all in my head. Maybe this isn't the reason why I'm having all these challenges, and I have for so many years. What if I don't get the diagnosis? And of course, there's the financial element as well, because it is a privilege
exactly.
to get a formal diagnosis. So you spend $1,500 or $2,000 getting the diagnosis. You don't kind of want it to be wrong.
Mm.
Yeah, so that finally led to me getting my own formal diagnosis a couple of months ago.
Oh my gosh, there's so much I want to unpack from that. Let's start with the last part first, and then we'll work our way backwards. I think that's really interesting that you say that there was almost a nervousness of what if I don't get the diagnosis, because I would imagine by the time you've gone through this process with your two daughters and you're coming to that diagnosis process yourself, if it's not there, then that means you're just, I would assume, a mum who can't cope.
Mm,
Then there's something wrong. There's almost, I've heard this for a lot of women that I've spoken to around this, that there is sometimes some surprise. They didn't really realize this about themselves, but also there is this deep sense of relief. Oh, that explains it. So
mm.
what was that process for you like? That journey,
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah. I mean, to be honest, I'm still in it. Like, it was
Mm.
only a couple of months ago, and there's still unpacking to do, as always. But I guess, like, the process of understanding about matrescence, of course, is extremely healing, because that is a potential reason in
Mm.
itself, of course, for all of the struggles, because we are living in this society where it's not set up to support mums.
Yeah.
So that was a huge part of my healing journey.
Mm.
But then I guess I've always felt like there was just this little bit of extra something. And I think this is just another puzzle piece, to
Mm.
help me explain why the challenges that I have had, and as you touched on before, the sensory overwhelm, the complete overwhelm in general of all of the inputs coming in, because as autistic people, we perceive the world differently, and pretty intensely a lot of the time. So it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And things like, I always had so much shame and guilt around just needing the amount of rest that I need.
Mm.
Like, you often, like, the only reason that I've got through the most challenging bits of motherhood is through having an afternoon rest and doing a yoga nidra, and resetting my nervous system. And I don't even know how I would have got by without those practices. And I'm thankful that I came across them through, various avenues. But um, yeah, I still was like, why? Why do I need so much rest compared to other people? Well, it's because I'm autistic, and everything is bloody overwhelming. Like, I perceive the world a little bit differently to the majority, and our society isn't, it's set up for the typical neuro majority, like, not, neurodivergent people.
There must be a process of grief and sadness and maybe even anger too in thinking about how different this could have been those early years when you have such a vivid memory of that day where you needed to call your husband because of, even when you think about that now, there must be, there would, I'm sure, be a process of why didn't I know? If only I'd known how different this could have been. Like, that's huge for both yourself and the mums that you talk to and the ones that are listening. We have to also acknowledge that you can get angry about, it didn't have to be like this.
Yeah,
That must be
yeah,
hard.
yeah. Yeah, it's massive. And I talk to mums about that all the time. It's okay to sit in the anger. And, we've talked about that in Mama Rising and all of the programs that you run as well. It's okay to sit in those big feelings and the anger and the so-called negative feelings, because that's what eventually leads to change.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I guess anger and sadness, and what could have been if I had known as a child, if my parents had known that. I mean, it wouldn't have been possible because we just didn't know about
Yeah.
how this neurotype looks for girls back then. Even 5 to 10 years ago, we weren't getting these diagnoses because we didn't understand how the presentation of autism is in females,
Mm.
or in the people who have an internalized presentation of autism. So yeah, all of those feelings, and then extreme gratitude that now now I know, and now I can continue. I guess I was already putting supports and accommodations in place for myself given what I was struggling with, but now I'm like, okay, yeah, I really know now. Let's really, I guess, feel into what I need and let go of any guilt that I have around the need for rest, because there's a reason and there's a valid reason.
Mm.
Mm.
And the thing that I keep thinking about when you're speaking, like supporting your girls coming home from school with those big meltdowns because they've been masking all day, our biggest role as mothers in particular, but as parents, is to kind of co regulate with them, right? So
Mhm.
when they're having the meltdown, to try and help them regulate themselves by you being steady. And it's like this. I had this beautiful mama say to me recently, parenting is 80% co regulation and 20% self regulation.
Yeah.
So, in other words, like it's demanded of us that we are constantly this source of steadiness. So,
Yeah.
how do you do that when your own regulation system is so misunderstood or misdiagnosed or not supported yet? That is like, that brings me anxiety thinking about trying to be, and I've had to do it myself, be the steady person for them when you are not steady yet yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that too.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's all take a breath. Ooh, and just acknowledge how freaking huge that is. That is so huge to have to be that person for them when you can't be it for yourself.
it's massive. Yeah. And like, if there's one message that I have for mamas, it's that, um, I guess the way that our therapy supports are set up here in Australia, and I'm sure elsewhere, is that you get this diagnosis for your child, and then all the supports are pumped into therapying the child, right? So they need to go into this one-on-one therapy with the OT and the speech and the psychologist and blah blah blah. Often the mum is just left to the side. So there might be a few like ad hoc conversations, but it's not this deep, how are you going? How are you managing with, how are you doing this co-regulation on the daily, all day, every day sometimes? Because we have to remember that some of these kids can't go to school, and homeschooling ends up being the option. So it's huge, and we need, it's just absolutely vital that the mums are supported, have to know that it's okay to have rest breaks, it's okay to ask for support, ask for help, which is really hard because it's often not there, but also opt for therapists who are going to support you as a mum and as a whole family unit, and not just the child. It's pointless otherwise.
Oh, I love that you say that we have to give the tools and resources and support to the mums and the parents along with the child. And I've often heard that it's almost impossible to get the support that you need for the child if you don't also do this with the parent. It's like it has to be together. We have to look at it as a holistic family unit approach. And I guess that's why you are here now doing what you do, which is tell us about what you're now so beautifully committed to doing and creating for these families.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to flow on from the co-regulation piece, it's we cannot, like, it's not from a neurological perspective possible to co-regulate when we are not regulated ourselves. It's actually impossible. So we need to come. That's why we need to put all of our supports in place so that we can be have our cups filled so that we can co-regulate with our children. So yeah,
Mm.
what I do is, I guess, a slightly different version of your normal occupational therapy services in the pediatric space, in that I coach and support mums and dads sometimes when they can be and want to be involved. But primarily it's mums, because we need to remember in neurodivergent families that often it's only one person in the family who can work, because the other person needs to do all of the care for the children.
That's
Um,
such an important point. Ah, yes, that is so true. Okay, we're going to come back to that too.
Yeah. So I work with the mums generally, mums and caregivers who are needing to do all of that co-regulating. So families will come to me saying, I need support with emotional regulation, behavior, feeding and fussy eating and sleep and toileting and all of these things that occupational therapists are known to work with. But I tackle it from the perspective of, okay, what supports do you need, mum, to be able to do this? And what techniques, like how can I provide psychoeducation and not just that, but just that real coaching, like as per the Mama Rising training, the coaching approach where I ask mum, okay, what do you think? Like, this is what I'm seeing, and wonder what we could do here. Like a lot of
Mm.
wondering and just prompting mum. It's a back and forth conversation, brainstorming almost, like
Mm.
what can we do? What are the possibilities here? And it's
Mm.
all about making life that little bit easier, and even like sparking a little bit more joy in your family. And
Yeah.
sometimes that seems sometimes just so far out of reach. And it was for me as well. Like back in the beginning, like how could I find joy in this experience, because I'm so overwhelmed right now. And so that is not an overnight process. I'm always really upfront. That is not an overnight process. This is months and years of work, And I think we are sometimes sold in the therapy world that there is an easy fix. You just go to go to the site, go to the OT, and you'll get a fix. Well, no, it doesn't work like that.
I remember a moment in supporting my daughter, and we had been through every system and every hospital. She'd spent time in hospital and was just so many months of trying to find what she needed. And I remember this realization of, oh my gosh, in the end, it's going to have to be me. Oh my gosh, in the end, it's going to be I am the main caregiver. I am the main organizer of every single appointment. I am the main co-regulator. It's going to be me. And it took me like quite a process to think maybe this person will fix us and maybe this person will fix us. And each of them provided a tiny puzzle piece. But in the end, when I finally came to realize, okay, it's you and me, kid, like, let's do this, there was this level of acceptance of that. But then once again, realizing I can't work the way I wanted to work. I don't have as much time as I thought I did. That even when I don't have her with me, there's constant text message. I'm always on alert. There's always, that must be such an important part of the coaching that you do with these mothers too. Like, okay, how are we going to support your child? But also let's just acknowledge that your identity has changed forever now. You are now the mother and maybe care provider and core support person for this child into adulthood, maybe forever. Let's sit with what that feels like and move through that. That would be a really beautiful process to be able to gift to them, Nicole.
It's such a beautiful opportunity. Like, I am always touched and so grateful for the opportunity that I have for women to be so open with me about all of that.
Yeah.
But it is, yes, so many feelings. Grief. I think we have to go through this grieving process of what we thought motherhood would look like and be like. And then it's only then, I think, once we go through this process, then we can get to acceptance and even an embracing of what this, like,
Yeah.
of what our situation is, who our child is, who we are, what our neurotype is, what supports we need, and like just being okay with all of that. It's a massive process. Yeah.
It's a massive process, and I'm so grateful that there's conversations like this. Really, even just like you said, realizing that I'm not going to be able to work or work the way that I thought I would. I thought by now I would be able to focus on my career, and I can't. Like, the layers that are invisible for this process for the parent is huge.
Yeah.
Wow. And so, on a day to day basis for you, then, beautiful, with your 3 children and your business and your own journey with this, how do you support yourself? I know you've mentioned a few things, but what does this look like for you now, do you think?
It's a constant revisiting of what I need.
Mm.
Like, even now, I run beautiful women's circles to support these mamas, but next term I'm taking a break. Like, I'm recognizing at the moment I'm just almost at that point of like I could spill over into burnout. I'm not going to go there because I know, and I tune in and it's a constant reflecting about what do I need in this moment, and I work with a coach. And I have a new therapist coming on board. Like, there's always someone in there. So like I prioritize. And again, I know that's a privilege, but I prioritize the ability to work with a coach or a therapist at any point, so to check in. I
Mm.
decrease my load where I can. Is I have a very supportive husband, and he does I'm very fortunate to have him because it's a constant. When I go into overwhelm, I get him to talk me down and talk me through, and like he's very practical, as men often are, and like, hey, this is where you need to, like, this is the decision that needs to be made. And it's a reaching out for support, which is limited. Like, we have very limited extended family supports, unfortunately, here. But it's, we've just found a 14-year-old high school girl down the road who's coming to help us out a couple of afternoons a week, because those afternoon
Perfect.
evening times are really overwhelming.
Mhm.
So many, like, as well as my daily practices of most days, yoga nidra and sitting late, like scheduling my days so that on my work days I have a long lunch break so I can eat something and then have a quick lay down. So many practices I have in place now that probably all stem back from that original,
5
7.
days to come.
Yeah, right. It was like a 3-minute meditation or something.
Yep. 3-minute meditation, tapping,
Yeah.
peace begins with me.
Yes,
Like, it was
yes.
all of this. Yeah. It's how it
Yeah, and
started
that's
all those years
that's
ago.
my working mum is like, start small. Like, what's a tiny thing you can do
Mm.
now to just start the momentum? Yeah.
Mm. Another one of the mamas who I think probably joined you in that first program all those years ago reminded me this week of, I think it was my very first blog post, which was about meditation and mascara.
Oh, yes.
It was the 3-minute meditation and mascara. That was how it began for me. Like, if I could just do that for myself, I could regroup. What
Yeah.
I hear you say, and it's so inspiring because I know what a journey you've been through, but you have this level of self awareness and self compassion and self empowerment now after this long, windy road of what's wrong with me and I wish I could do better, to now fully understand. And I know it's only a new process, but I just want to reflect back to you, having known you for so long. I can hear and feel and see this level of self acceptance and self understanding that is here, that is actually quite phenomenal and deeply inspiring. So, thank you, beautiful.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it has been a journey.
As this matrescence thing is, we're going to put all of the details in the show notes for people to be able to reach out and contact you. I just want to check, at this stage, you do everything in person, or if somebody wants to reach out to you online, are you able to support them remotely?
Yeah, no, I've actually just shifted my circle online. So the last round
Great.
I did run in the online space, and most of my work that supports me to be able to work online because I can do it from home and there's a lot less mental load and overwhelm. So I actually do the great majority of my work online, my one-on-one and my circle work.
Yay, amazing. Well, mamas, you know where to find her. Please check the show notes. And thank you again, beautiful. It's been amazing to see this journey that you've been on.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks for starting me off on the journey.
Oh, we've done it together. We've learnt together. Thank you, beautiful. Thanks, as always, for being a part of our global Matrescence community. Please take a moment and make sure you're subscribed to this podcast in your podcast player so you can always be notified of our next episode. And if you would like to work with a coach on your own experience of matrescence, please go to mamarising.net and explore our directory of phenomenal coaches, workshop leaders, space holders and facilitators around the globe. You can also explore our Global Matrescence Foundation and consider donating so a mama in need can access the support of one of our coaches and still ensure that our coaches receive the income and support they need so they can continue to work in this way. And finally, if you would like to be a coach, a facilitator and a matrescence activist in your own community, jump on our waitlist for our next intake of the Mama Rising Facilitator training at mamarising.net. Thank you for being here and being part of this movement. Until next week, bye.